All right, so everyone who's here, we'll go ahead and get started. My name is Halo Saranko, in case you are not aware of that yet. And I am the founder of Shakti Temple Arts, which is a school in which I teach temple dance and women's tantra and Taoist practices. And I am specifically passionate about women's health, especially relating to the womb and yoni. So today's curriculum is all about all these tools that I've gathered throughout the years that help nourish the womb and yoni and essentially the feminine as a whole. So when I talk about holistic yoni care, let's talk about the word holistic. So when I speak holistically, I'm not just talking about physically caring for the yoni, but this is also connecting then into our yoni's relationship with our heart, in our relationships, our yoni's relationship to our voice and our empowerment, our yoni's relationship to our thoughts, to our emotions, to the mind, as well our yoni's relationship to our spirit. So really, when we're talking about holistic yoni care, we're talking about how through the medium of the yoni, through having a physical yoni and womb and female reproductive organs, how we can nourish ourselves literally from the bottom up, kind of from the base to the crown of our being. What I've noticed being a woman is that messages from spirit tend to trickle down through the layers into the physical being. And for me, the voice of spirit is frequently manifested in the yoni, if that makes sense. And so I've learned a lot over the years in working with that and growing a deeper and deeper relationship with the voice of my womb, with the voice of my yoni. And so today is going to be all about sharing what I've learned personally, and then also in preparation for an online course that I'm holding in September, the Jade Temple Online Initiation, also tools that I've gathered from the Taoist system of thought and practice and female sexual energy cultivation and self-care. So we're going to be covering as much as possible in our time together today. And I just hope you receive a wealth of information. So if you don't have it with you already, you will definitely want to have a journal and something to drink, perhaps. Just make sure you're really comfortable and you have something to take notes. A lot of what I'm going to share is in the Holistic Yoni Care PDF that you should have received upon registration. I will also send that out with the replay of this webinar, so that you will for sure have that to download. I'm noticing on my screen, my video is a bit jumpy. Is that happening for you guys? Will you let me know either in the chat? Hopefully it's better on your end. Okay. It's a little bit, not too much. Thank you, Dolores. You're awesome. Feedback is helpful when I can't see any of you. Okay, great. So let's go ahead and start just by dropping in and connecting with our womb and with our yonis. And just becoming fully present in the body. So I invite everyone who's here to close your eyes and just take a moment to really allow yourself to soften, to allow yourself to sink into the feminine, to be nourished in receptivity. Allowing your breath to deepen and guide you further and further within. And dropping the breath all the way down into the base of the belly at the womb, and feeling the yoni against your seat where you're sitting. Drawing each breath all the way down. With each inhale, I invite you to draw yourself fully present into the body. And with each exhale, I invite you to allow yourself to soften even further and to really allow the weight of your body to sink into your seat. Giving yourself full permission to take this next couple of hours to just receive and to share if you feel inspired, and to just be with your femininity, with your experience of being a spirit in a woman's body with a feminine essence. And just in your own way, taking a moment of gratitude for this female body, for this female anatomy, for all of the power, the pleasure, and even the pain that may be a result of having a yoni, of having a womb, of having ovaries. Recognizing that it is a journey to be in a body, period, and it is a journey to be in a woman's body. And just taking a moment to honor your journey, whatever that has looked like in this body. And from that place of honoring, we'll begin our discussion today. So as you're ready, I invite you to open your eyes and just come back into the space that you are inhabiting. All right, ladies. So here we go. So I would like to open our space with any requests. If anyone has a request of a topic you'd like me to touch on, I have a vast array of directions we can go in today, and I also have a plan for us. But I also want to make sure that I cover something that is going to be useful to the women who are here and present. So if you would like, you can unmute yourself and either share that, or you can just use the chat box and let me know if there's anything very specific. And with that said, I just want to stress that this is a safe space, and anything that is up for you in your journey of being a woman and having a yoni is likely relevant for others. So if there's anything specific that you'd like me to touch on today, please let me know now. This is our time. And also at the end of the webinar, you'll have another opportunity to share if you wish. So let me know. Everyone good? Okay. Then we'll just go forward. If at any point somebody wants me to touch on something, just enter it into the chat box, okay? And I will see it. Okay, so let's begin. Again, I'm coming from, specifically in this talk, a Taoist background, which means Taoism is a philosophy that stems in ancient China, and this is where the jade egg practices originated from, and where this particular system of female sexual energy cultivation came from. And so Tao, T-A-O, literally means the way. It's this kind of energy that creates all things. It's the yin and the yang, the masculine and feminine, the sun and moon, the lunar and solar. So within our lives, kind of our goal, even as women and in a woman's body, is to harmonize our experience of our masculine and feminine energies within, so that we can have more fulfilling relationships without, and have a more harmonious experience of life as a whole, right? So why this is important and why this is such a good lens when we're talking about holistic yoni care is that as women, we move through cycles. So we move, our menstrual cycle very much governs every aspect of our lives, whether we're aware of it or not, right? So our energy levels are governed, our emotions are governed, our connection to the divine is governed by that, as well as our connection to the earth and to our bodies. So there's just so much caught up in that cyclic unfolding. And now that unfolding, those cycles are very much a reflection of the Tao and of this great system of thought and practice. So throughout our cycle, we're going, somewhat related to the moon. We're all in different places now as we have more artificial light and there's more stress in our lives, in an era of technology and in an era where women get to be a part of the workforce and all of this. This is a beautiful opportunity for us, and it's added more stress into our lives, and into our bodies. So back before there was artificial light and there was, stress, so to speak, or more stress, when we were more connected to nature, we tended to bleed on the new moon. And then our cycle would build, our uterine lining would build, and we would ovulate with the full moon. And then as that egg wasn't fertilized, the lining would get old and then shed again on the new moon. So that was our reflection of yin and yang. So the new moon representing the yin, or that time of receptivity, of release, and the full moon representing our yang, or that time of fullness or potential fertility, right? Nowadays, again, it's like sometimes we might bleed with the full moon, sometimes we might bleed with the waxing moon or with the waning moon. And wherever we are, we still have that same kind of reflection of yin and yang, our menstrual cycle being our more yin part of our cycle, or we're at the most in our feminine kind of inward, receptive, tender nature. And our ovulation, when we're in more of that full magnetic, outward, extroverted expression of ourselves. So this is kind of how we're going to lens our discussion for today, is through these cycles of yin and yang and how they reflect in our yoni, and different topics that are associated with these different phases in our cycle, which will be cut up into 4 phases. So where we'll start today is with our menstrual phase. And again, like I said, that it's kind of associated with the new moon energy, with that dark, shedding, releasing, turning inward yin energy. So in relation to our menstrual cycle, basically what's happening during that time in our cycle is our uterine lining that was all carefully prepared by the body, full of cells and nutrients, stem cells and nutrients and all kinds of good things to nourish new life. If that wasn't made useful via pregnancy, then that lining will begin to deteriorate and eventually shed through the yoni. So that's what our menstrual blood is. Now, in the Taoist tradition, we have this really potent sexual energy inside of us called Jing. And this Jing energy is our creative life force energy. And it's said to be carried in the fluids of the body. And it is released. We release a little bit of our Jing every time we bleed. So however many times that happens through our life cycle, we're releasing some of our life force energy every time we menstruate. Now, the more we can come into consciousness or more awareness around this fact, I mean, we can experience this, almost all women, we feel more tired, we feel more withdrawn, maybe more moody around this time of our cycle. There's a very real reason for this, and this is that we are literally releasing our life force energy during this time in our cycle. So there's nothing wrong with the way we feel around that time. And the more we can support that process, the more we can replenish that energy for ourselves. So the important pieces of yoni care in relation to menstruation are nourishing our blood or nourishing our Jing. And this also can come to nourishing our kidney energy, because this whole cycle of how that Jing energy is governed is ruled by the kidneys. So our kidneys are related to the water element. And when we think of nourishing the kidneys, I think of hot baths and drinking tea and like that real calm kind of energy, like in wintertime when it's so silent outside and it's so still, and you're inside and you're by the fire and you're warm and cozy in a blanket and you're drinking tea. Like that is kind of the picture of what it looks like to nourish the kidneys. So it's very important, and we're going to have more graceful menstrual cycles if we're nourishing the energy of the kidneys specifically. And so that does look like taking baths. That does look like kind of stepping back from our lives and allowing ourselves some more meditative time. Now, if we have a 9-to-5 and that doesn't fit with our 9-to-5, even if it's, after 5 when we come home and we can really just let ourselves relax, ideally we could give ourselves at least the whole first day off of our menstrual cycle. But at the very least, 5 minutes, just taking some time to, even how we entered into our conversation today, to just let yourself be soft and let everything go. Just let everything go, right? So that's the invitation that's happening when we're shedding that uterine lining. And so we want to not only nourish the kidneys, and again, what that looks like rest, that looks like meditation, that looks like baths, that looks like self-massage, warm oil massage or receiving massage. But we also want to nourish our blood specifically. The blood is governed by the liver and spleen in the Taoist tradition. So we want to be also taking care of our liver. So this is why we tend to get irritable in our premenstrual phase. The liver can store energy of irritability in it. And so it's because when our liver is being somewhat taxed just by our natural cyclic process, especially if we have any hormonal balance of sorts, then we can be extra irritable during this time. Spleen also has to do with anxiety and stress, are kind of the negative emotions that happen there. So when we're overly stressed in our premenstrual or menstrual phase of our cycle, we're literally having organs that are assisting us in being extra sensitive and irritable to stress, literally. So how can we nourish our blood during this part of our cycle? Well, there's several things that we can do. If you're not vegetarian or vegan, bone broth is an excellent way to nourish the blood and to nourish especially the spleen and the kidneys. You can also eat mung beans, are a great thing. So you can make mung dal or even just mung bean sprouts, but mung beans are also great for nourishing the blood. Goji berries are great for nourishing the blood, eating beets. So diet is a great way to nourish the blood. Now you want to think during this part of the cycle, we tend to have the most cravings. We tend to crave sugar, which is kind of the worst thing. That's the spleen. That's the spleen causing those sugar cravings, spleen light sweet. But that's not going to be the best thing for us at the time, unfortunately. But what we want to start doing is we want to eat kind of denser, more calorie-rich foods. So some sweet foods that are going to be nourishing to the process are like sweet potatoes and yams. Those are going to be excellent for nourishing the spleen energy and for nourishing the blood during that time. So root vegetables are great. I mean, if you think about it, we're very much in our root energy at that point in time. So we want to be nourishing our root energy. Okay, so there are other dietary suggestions in your packets. Buckwheat is another great food to eat during your menstrual cycle or pre and post. as well as seaweed. Seaweed's another really nourishing one for the Jing energy especially. So these are some ways more physically that we can nourish this energy. Now also, if we are, for example, I'm a dancer, and sometimes I'm in rigorous training. Now, I really try to back off around my menstrual cycle. So this is another thing, is we want to, our body should feel it, but oftentimes we're taught, you know, in this society to keep pushing ourselves and to over masculinize ourselves. But really what our bodies need is rest, and that's really okay. And so giving ourselves permission to, like, you know, go to if we're yoga practitioners, to do a more yin yoga practice rather than a full on like Ashtanga practice or hardcore vinyasa, you know, to really allow to support the energy that we're naturally feeling in our lives, right? So these are some ways that we can nourish that blood. The other piece I want to speak about in relation to menstruation and yoni health are cramps, because those are something that a lot of us deal with. So some of the things I shared before can really help with cramps. Another thing that will really help with cramps is watching your blood sugar that week before your menstrual cycle. And what that means is, you know, in this society, we tend to drink caffeine and forget to eat, or things like this, or like I said, eat too much sugar because we're craving sweet. So we want to avoid eating too much sugar. Except dates. Dates are actually a great ally for working with cramps, surprisingly. This is an old Ayurvedic secret that women would eat dates and it would help alleviate menstrual cramps. So definitely no processed sugars, and minimal sugars. Unfortunately, minimal chocolate, even, because it has caffeine and sugar in it a lot of the time, and that can cause us, dates. I know. I learned that in India, actually. I spend a lot of time in India, and an Ayurvedic doctor told me that, and it actually has helped me. So dates. I'm not sure why that is, but I trust Ayurveda. It's another one of those really old systems. So we want to take care of our blood sugar. We want to make sure we're not allowing our blood sugar to do big spikes and crashes. And this is one of the problems when we're craving sweets. That's usually a sign that our blood sugar is doing that, unfortunately. So we want to eat every 3 hours, even if it's just a little something, to keep our blood sugar nice and solid throughout the days. This is, again, I'm specifically talking about like the week before, although this is actually important throughout the entirety of our cycle. But that week before we bleed, we really want to be taking in nourishment, right? So we want to make sure that our blood sugar is staying nice and happy. Okay. So then if we do deal with cramps, what are some things that we can do about that? Eating a ton of dates is maybe not going to do it, but it might help. So for dealing with menstrual cramps, one of the things that's gaining popularity is yoni steaming. And this is something that I don't necessarily do during my menstrual cycle, but the week leading up to it. So yoni steaming, if you're unfamiliar, is where we use different herbs, and there's different combinations for different things. For menstrual cramps, I would use motherwort, I would use red raspberry leaf, I would use rosemary, maybe even calendula and lavender. And so you'd brew a very strong tea with this. You don't want to boil the herbs, but you put them in a pot, let them simmer for like 10 minutes tops, and then let them steep for about 5 to 10 minutes. And then they have special steaming stools that you can get, or you can get creative and get 2 chairs and set them next to each other and let your yoni be in between. And then you want to cover with blankets. And I usually pour the tea into a big mason jar, but you can just leave it in the pot, and you let that steam come up into the womb. And specifically for dealing with menstrual cramps, I feel it's good to do this like at least 3 times within that week before. Now, if you are having menstrual cramps, some things you can do are cramp bark. It works really well, especially combined with cinnamon and motherwort. This is the kind of thing that, you know, I find that if you have an actual herbalist or a naturopathic doctor who can actually create a formula for you, sometimes I find the stuff that you buy at the store isn't always strong enough. But those have been great allies on my path as far as cramps. Castor oil packs are another great option. So you can get a wool flannel, and then castor oil you can buy at most health food stores. It's a really thick oil. And you'll want to warm the oil, and then you can even kind of massage it into the womb. And I like to massage, if I'm menstruating, I like to massage in the direction of the flow. So kind of massaging more downward with the womb. And then I like to place the flannel with the castor oil and then put a hot water bottle over that. And this is just, for me, this is total spa time. It almost makes, if I am having menstrual cramps, which I still do get occasionally, usually I notice them when I've had a particularly stressful or emotional month. I will get cramps. Again, this is how I feel like our yonis and wombs are essentially allies, you know, because it's like, yeah, if I'm not listening, if I'm not living my life in good harmony and balance and staying connected with my body, then she's going to let me know usually around the menstrual time of my cycle. So if I do get cramps, I'm like, oh, yep, okay. You know, I could have done something different this month or whatnot. So always looking at it as an ally experience is also really helpful, whatever you're going through. And, you know, something I want to say here is that as women, we're all going through initiatory gateways, I would call them, with our female parts. You know, if there's not something, there's another thing. You know, there's few of us who have just a completely harmonious, perfect experience of having a womb and having a yoni, right? So those are some options for menstrual cramps. I've also found CBD oil, hemp oil, to be highly effective. And again, stress reduction is one of the biggest things when it comes to menstrual cramps, I've found. Another thing that can be associated with them is if you have hypertonic muscles in the pelvic floor. So that's something to get checked out, and you can tell by massaging, which we'll talk a little bit more about a little later in the talk, but starting to do regular internal yoni massage for yourself, or even going to receive from a specialist. I'm not talking pleasurable yoni massage, I'm talking structural therapy, actually. So we want to make sure that we don't have overly tight muscles in the yoni. So for the sake of time, I'm going to move on from menstrual cycle. Does anybody have anything pertaining to menstruation that they want to ask? You can either unmute in the left corner and speak it, or just pop it into the chat box if there's something. I'm going to keep talking, and I'll see if something pops up. But, okay, so then we move from our menstrual phase into our follicular phase. So follicular phase, you can think of a follicle, is when we're then starting to rebuild that lining. So as soon as we shed the lining, we start rebuilding a new one, because our body gives us an opportunity every single month of our childbearing years to get pregnant. I think nature's got a bit of an agenda. So our follicular phase, our body is rebuilding the nest in hopes of impregnation. So this is a time in the cycle that we tend to have the most energy. Like if our hormones are in a good place, usually our energy wanes coming towards menstruation. And then we might be in a bit of a pause during the menstrual cycle. And then when we are coming out of our menstrual cycle, we tend to get a rush of energy, and all of a sudden it literally kind of feels like a rebirth, right? So then we have all this energy, and this is the best time for us to like start new projects, to start acting on goals. This is when we're entering our kind of yang part of our cycle, or the more active outward part of our cycle. So here is where we are very much in tune with our ovarian energy, I like to think of it. So our ovarian energy is very strong and hot and that Jing energy I was talking about earlier is stored in our ovaries as the ovum or as the eggs, right? This is our creative life force energy. And so after we've bled and we're coming into this more yang part of our cycle, that ovarian energy gets very activated, and we can feel that. So in the Taoist practices, the ovarian energy is one of the predominant energies we work with when we're working with our sexual energy. So we learn how to milk the energy from the ovaries, the Jing energy, and to circulate it throughout our body. Now, the follicular phase is an exceptionally great time to do this because that energy is extra supercharged during this phase. And so some of those practices, doing practices where we are kind of riding that natural wave of energy is really great. So this is a great time to be more active, to be more physical, especially. So a really important piece of yoni care, of having a happy, healthy yoni, is physical exercise just for the whole body. So we need to keep our energy moving or it stagnates. And one of the places that energy tends to stagnate is in the womb and the yoni. And if we have tendencies with chronic like yeast infections or bacterial vaginitis, something that causes dampness, and you can literally tell because there's more discharge or whatnot. So this is excess dampness, they would call it in the Chinese system. And that tends to have to do with kind of stagnating energy or too much yin energy. So while I'm all about all things feminine and woman, and I feel like our world needs more of that, there can also be too much yin. We're really here to find balance. So when we're having too much yin in our bodies, we can have this problem. And so it's really important, especially in the follicular phase, that we take advantage of this more yang energy. And so we can kind of move and get that energy circulating again during this phase. Now, again, this is why it's such a great place to start new projects or to really kind of build our external reality the way we want it to look, because we have all this extra force of energy. I'm heading into that phase right now. So I've got a lot, I'm feeling it already. I'm like, whoo, it's one of my favorite parts of my cycle because it just does. It feels like I feel unstoppable at this point, right? So, so this is a great time to start new patterns because we're going to get less pulled by addictive behaviors and whatnot. So if we are wanting to step up to better yoni health or whatever, this is a great time to like really set in place new patterns of growth and ways of being. Now, another way to bring more yang energy, especially if we are dealing with extra dampness or kind of like stagnated yin energy in the womb and yoni, is yoni sunning, which is one of my favorite practices. So it's exactly how it sounds. You literally let the rays of the sun shine where it doesn't often. Let's see. Day 2 of bleeding. Awesome. Well, I'm around your same cycle, dear. I'm like I'm heading out. I think I'm day 4. So yeah, share where you're at in your cycle. That would be fun to know. Thank you. So sunning the yoni, ideal to do again during the follicular phase or ovulatory phase when we want to bring more yang energy in. So we can find a secret spot where we can literally open our flowers to the sunshine. Now, because these are really sensitive tissues and they don't see a lot of sunlight, you don't want to do this for you can build little by little. You might just want to do 5 minutes up to like 20 minutes tops, I would say, like tops. You don't need your yoni in the sun for half an hour. You might have adverse effects. But letting your yoni see the sun. You can even practice breathing the solar yang rays up into your womb and yoni. Yeah, this is a really nice practice, again, for bringing that more yang energy in, for helping to feed that ovarian energy. This is also great for nourishing the kidneys as well. So Yeah, and the follicular phase, I feel like it's all about fertility. Like this is where we're kind of building up our fertility again, moving towards ovulation. So again, when it comes to fertility, we really want to be working for optimal fertility. We want to be working in harmony with our cycles. When we're out of harmony or we're stressed out, or again, the blood sugar thing is really crucial. And I'm going to recommend a book that talks all about that. That's been a game changer for me. But we want to, keep ourselves in this harmonious flow. We want to make sure we're nourishing ourselves. Hi, Shona. Yay. So we want to, again, we want to make sure our blood sugar is good. We want to make sure we're getting enough exercise. We want to make sure we're getting enough rest. Like especially one thing I want to say about fertility in this day and age is that we're up against a lot as women. And this is something, a deep journey I just recently went on, spending a lot of time in India. And I noticed in India, like we're really blessed here in the West, or I don't know where everyone's coming from, but we still have largely environmental regulations. We have clean air, we have clean water for the most part, but there are still things. But there are a lot of the world is living in kind of environmentally toxic conditions. And my last trip to India, I actually found out that I had gotten lead poisoning. And this really disrupted my hormones. And it kind of, I had this huge epiphany during the process of how infertility is becoming a larger and larger problem for women in this day and age. And it's a direct reflection of what's happening to our planet. It's a direct reflection of what's happening to the women on the planet. But we are toxifying our environment. And this is having really adverse effects. And so something that used to be kind of more natural for women, I feel like, to be fertile and to have regulated hormones and whatnot, is something that we kind of have to put more time and energy into nowadays. And so we really want to be tending the garden of our womb and of our fertility. So this is a great segue into the endocrine system. The endocrine system is the system of glands, including the pineal and pituitary gland, which are the number one hormonal kind of switchboards. And then our thyroid as well, thyroid, parathyroid, our thymus gland at the heart, our adrenal glands. Those are other ones that get whacked out in this day and age because of stress and various things, our ovaries. So we really, this whole system is very delicate, and we really want to take as good a care of it as possible. And this is another thing, that if our hormonal system is out of balance, we're going to notice that reflected in our yoni. We might have painful intercourse. We might have dryness. We might have, oftentimes ovarian cysts or endometriosis or different ailments like those are caused by hormonal imbalance first and foremost, and can actually be fully healed if we bring our hormones into balance. So how can we bring our hormones into balance if they're not? First of all, how do we know if they're not in balance? Well, like I said, we might be dealing with these direct issues. Like, again, our yoni will let us know if things aren't working out. If we have significant premenstrual symptoms, then it might be due to a hormonal imbalance. There are various ways to tell. Obviously, if we're trying to conceive and we're having difficulty, that could be a very direct example of that. But if we are noticing that our hormones are out of balance, then my biggest suggestion is stepping back from stress. One of the greatest things that's going to affect us is stress in our lives. And that's not just emotional or mental stress, but as I learned in India, it's also physical stress. Like if our body is in a physically toxic environment, or so we have to look at kind of all this whole big picture when it comes to our fertility. and our well-being in this area. Ways to get back on track if you're not, besides reducing stress, are herbs are great allies. One of my favorite herbs in my process with this was schizandra berry. And I'm not going to spell that because it's a mouthful, but it starts SCHIZ. Anyway, it's a long word. But schizandra berry is an amazing adaptogen, which means it helps kind of bring us back to our middle point, no matter how we've come out of alignment. So schizandra berry can be made into a tea. It can be taken as a tincture. But schizandra berry is going to be a great ally, and it's something that you can do as a daily tonic, and it's just especially good for the female system, and especially in relation to kind of balancing out stress, both emotional and from environmental factors. Some other great herbs when working with hormones are vitex berry, dong quai, white peony for testosterone. So it's also good to know which hormones are out of place. Some ways to know: testosterone is responsible for our libido. So if we're working with low libido, usually that correlates to having low testosterone. Yes, again, this comes back to that yin-yang factor, where yes, we're in a female body, but we need that yang energy. I mean, if you look at the male sexual response, it's very different than the females. Like, they're kind of hot and ready to go right away. Well, that's that testosterone energy. So we also need the testosterone. So if our testosterone is low, then we might be having issues with libido. And we can nourish that with white peony. And again, schizandra berry is good for that one as well. Shatavari is another one of my all-time favorites, and that's an Ayurvedic herb, spelled Shatavary, sorry. So shatavari is amazing. I like to mix it with ashwagandha, which is also going to be good for balancing that yin-yang. So shatavari is kind of the feminine, and then ashwagandha is the masculine. And they work really well together. Ashwagandha is also an adaptogen. So these are great herbs for helping. Yes, awesome. Shatavari cardamom tea is awesome. Yes. So these are some great herbal allies on that path. Dong quai is another one that you can use kind of tonically, it's a pretty bitter root, which is also why it's good for, as we were talking about nourishing the blood, it's good for the liver as well. It's good for the spleen. It's good for the kidneys. Like, it's kind of an all-around great herb for the feminine being. Okay. So I'm going to switch gears, but our fertility. So another piece of Yoni care is really tending to our fertility, really paying attention. On that note, let's talk a little bit about how we know if we're fertile, because there's a few different signs that we can look at to gauge our fertility and when we're fertile. So moving into the ovulatory phase, this is when we are fertile. So this is that stretch of period that's usually around 5 days that we are considered fertile, that we can conceive a child. And the ovulation itself will usually happen in a moment. The egg will be released into the uterus, but then the yoni creates an environment that can then, yes, and goji berry, exactly. Sorry, I lost my train of thought. I got excited about your goji berry comment, Shona. Where was I? Right, so our yoni create this perfect environment that egg can then survive until we have the opportunity to be inseminated by semen. And so several things happen during that time. So the egg comes from one of the ovaries. And an interesting other piece on that yin-yang Taoist theory moment is that when all of our hormones are happy and our reproductive organs are happy, our ovaries actually take turns ovulating each month. So our left one will ovulate 1 month, and then our right one will ovulate the next month. Now, I have a sneaking suspicion that conscious conception, not contraception, can be used with these ovaries. Like perhaps, our left ovary carries more feminine essence, our right ovary carries more masculine essence. So if the egg that was placed into the uterus was from the left ovary, there's going to be a greater chance potentially of a female child, whereas with the right, it's going to be a greater chance for a male. There are other factors here, of course, but I just think that's interesting to note. But anyway, so our ovaries take turns. So our left will ovulate, and then the next month our right will ovulate. So that egg will come through the fallopian tube, and that beautiful lining in the uterus that has been built up, waiting for that egg, the egg will implant itself, and then should we receive semen into our body, then there's that chance of pregnancy. So the other things that our yoni does to help support this process, because that's essentially what it's hoping is going to happen, is that our cervix will soften and come up into the body. So during this time, it's more difficult to reach our cervix. So one way that we can start tracking our fertility, and I tend to do this in the shower. So in the shower is a really great time to just like reach in there mindfully and lovingly and see where our cervix is located. If we're infertile, our cervix tends to feel hard. It's kind of like the tip of the nose. So we can feel it's easier to reach, and it's kind of more hard and pointy. And all of our cervixes are a little different, but that's generally how it will feel. Then when we're ovulating or in our fertile phase, we'll be having to reach a little bit deeper, and she might feel more soft and spongy. So that is one great way to tell. Another great way, obviously, is through our fluids. So throughout our cycle, we have these different discharges that happen. Our yoni is this brilliant self-cleansing being, which is why I also am just going to say right here that she doesn't love soap. Soap is not the best for her. She's got it covered. And so the best way that I suggest washing her is with diluted apple cider vinegar mixed with water. And I just have a little bottle of it in my shower, and I just like rinse with that. Because that supports her pH, whereas soap tends to affect her pH. This is why if you've ever had a yeast infection or a bacterial vaginitis infection, they tell you not to use soap. Well, we should actually just never use soap, in my opinion, on our yonis. Anyway, so she's self-cleansing. So throughout our cycle, we've got these different discharges that will happen. We might have more white and creamy discharge as we come close to our menstrual cycle. Totally normal. Then we bleed. And then after our menstrual cycle, we tend to have the least amount of discharge. And then our discharge will start building up again as we get closer to ovulation. But it will start to be more clear and slippery and kind of stretchy. So it's the same as our fertile fluid. So if you're not sure what I mean, next time you're aroused, take some of that fluid and pull it between the fingertips, and you'll actually get a full stretch. So when it's tacky, it'll just stick to each finger, but it won't stretch between them. That's infertile discharge. But if it stretches, it's kind of like an egg white. That means that we're fertile, right? So checking our discharge and checking our cervix are great ways to tell where we're at in our cycle. Again, I find, to remember to do this, I'll do it like when I go pee, I'll like just check the discharge while I'm peeing. Or if I'm in the shower, I'll check the cervix. So these help me remember how and when to keep track of those things. So I want to talk about, I want to have some fun like sex ed moments, because I always like having what I call the sex ed we all wish we had but didn't talk. So obviously sexuality is a part of our lives as women and a big part of our yoni health, sometimes for better and sometimes for worse. So some things I want to talk about here are conception and contraception, as well as the female sexual response and our relationship to, and sexually transmitted diseases, and some ways we can work with those energies in this part of our cycle. So let's start with contraception or conception. So obviously, where do I start with this? So I'm a firm believer as a naturalist and as someone who works with sexual energy and sexual practices. I think it's amazing when we can be with a partner specifically and not use condoms and not do these kind of things, so that we have more intimacy, so that we have more energetic exchange happening, which I do feel condoms block a little bit. However, if we're not in, a really clearly communicated sexual relationship with somebody, where we really know someone's sexual history and they know ours and we know ours, and everything's really clear and consensual and out and open, then, or even then, let's say our partner has herpes or something like that, like, it's up to us to really tend the flower of our yoni. And so one thing I want to say here is that I'm a huge advocate, having gone through a 4-year healing journey with HPV 16 and cervical dysplasia, and having had and living with herpes over the last couple years and different things. I'm just going to be very transparent. Part of the reason I teach this curriculum is that I've done some dancing before. I used to suffer chronic bacterial vaginitis. So I feel really passionate about taking the taboo out of all this shit, because again, it's like, I feel like a lot of times we don't talk about these things. We don't talk about the challenging things we go through. And yet all the women, the more I've started talking, the more I realize, like, oh wow, we're kind of all going through this stuff. Why are we not talking about it? Why are we not sharing this experience? Because there's so much guilt and shame that happens when we just hold this stuff inside. But when we realize that, like, this is a collective experience that's happening, then I feel like we can actually do something about it, So that's my segue into saying how important I feel safe sex is. I don't know if you guys thought you were going to come into a safe sex conversation, but here we are. I'm a big fan of this because the risks are real, and we are stewarding this amazing, sensitive, precious, ancient, powerful body part. It's super important. So what's happened in my experience is that, for so many years, the feminine wasn't allowed to have a voice. We were property of men, so we kind of had to do their bidding, and we weren't allowed to speak our boundaries, and we weren't allowed, we just didn't have a voice. And so what I've noticed in my own journey of being a woman, I'm 31 now, but in my early 20s and whatnot, I went through a big learning curve, as many of us did, where I realized that, like, my womb and my voice were not connected, and I had a really hard time with boundaries, and it led to a number of things. And what I learned in that process is that, like, this is mine, and that's really important. And it's like, one of my big healing pieces with cervical dysplasia was, like, nobody dishonored me more than I did. It was me. It was my responsibility to tend this temple. And this whole curriculum, which, it's different every time I teach it, because there's just so much to cover. So whatever wants to come out, comes out, which is why I still encourage, if you have something specific, to type it out. But this is why I developed this whole curriculum, because I just feel like it's so important that we take back our power of being the ones who steward these bodies. I like to think of myself as a steward to my womb space, as a steward to my yoni, that, like, rather than it doing my bidding, the mind, like, how many times do we allow ourselves to be entered or penetrated because our mind wants us to, but our body's not ready yet? That's just one example. And I feel like every woman I know knows what I'm talking about with that. Like, there's some disconnects that have been made. And so a lot of the work with the jade egg, of the Taoist work, of kind of any embodiment work that especially has to do with sexual energy, is about reorienting our system of navigation to our womb, and this doesn't mean from our loins or that lusty energy that can also get us in trouble, but from our deeper wisdom to learning to really listen. So from here, I want to go into the female sexual response, because this is another thing that's been really twisted in society, and it's been a cause for a lot of ailments in the female body and in the yoni, because we haven't been taught to honor the female sexual response. We've seen pornography, which depicts women as, basically being able to be pounded really hard after, pardon my French, but after, immediately, like you rip her clothes off and you can just start pounding her and that's going to be okay. Now, sometimes that might be, if there's been a bit build up with somebody, but the quality of yin energy is that it starts out cool and it gradually builds up. Now, this is like the race of the tortoise and the hare, right? So the hare is masculine sexual energy, which is just like ready, go, but then burns out. We've all seen that. A man ejaculates and then he's like down for the count. And we're like, well, I guess I'm done too then, right? And a female sexual energy, it might take us longer to get going, but once we're going, it's like we have this infinite capacity for pleasure and depth and expansion, right? And we need to be honored for that. And first and foremost, we need to honor ourselves for that. Now, we're all unique. I'm not going to say that we're all exactly the same, but generally, the female sexual response starts from out here. Like our environment, first and foremost, needs to feel good and safe and like something we want to open into erotically. We need to feel good in our skin. We need to get out of the brain and into the body, which is another, for those of us walking the modern entrepreneur path, it's like that becomes more of a task, I've noticed. It's like, okay, I need to shut off that version of myself and step into step into my feminine again. So we have to feel good in our body. And, the touch, I've noticed for myself, if a man goes straight for the goods, my initial reaction is like, whoa, I want to be touched. I want to be like enjoyed, I want to enjoy and be enjoyed. So it's like, I want to build the energy before we go for my yoni, and the way our sexual response works, and there's a great book, I'm forgetting the author right now, but oh my God, and I'm forgetting the name, Anatomy of Feminine Sexual Arousal. Anyway, I'll send it to you in the message if I remember, but it talks a lot about this. And basically that even once our juices are flowing, there are several things that need to happen for us to be ready for full penetration. First of all, the lubrication needs to start flowing, right? That's when we know our Jing energy or that sexual energy is starting to flow. The next thing that happens, it's really, really important, is that cervix. And I learned a lot about the cervix in my journey with cervical dysplasia. That cervix represents our gate guardian. Right? She will let us know, first of all, our yoni will let us know as well whether we want a particular energy to penetrate us or not. Next, our cervix will let us know. When she wants to invite somebody in, she does the same thing she does during ovulation, but this also just happens every time we're sexual, where she will soften and lift in and up to create more room for the phallus. Now, if you've ever had a painful experience during intercourse where it felt like something got hit and it's like definitely painful, that was probably your cervix not being fully ready for penetration. So we want to really honor the time that it takes us, and it's going to be unique to the situation. If we're in a longer term monogamous relationship, generally it's going to take us longer to get warmed up than if we're with a new guy that we're really excited about and the juices are already flowing. So at different times in our life, at different times in our cycle, with different men, different dynamics, like it's always going to be different in a feminine body. Masculine is more pillar, it's like kind of the same every time. I mean, it's different, but you know what I mean. It's like woman takes her clothes off, man gets an erection, he's ready to go. Whereas with us, there's so many factors, and it's like we're Shakti, right? We're complex. There's so much to it. And so we need to listen every time and be like, okay, am I ready? Am I really ready? And again, not let our mind trip up. You know, one of the stories I used to have was like, oh, I don't want him to have to like wait or whatever it is if I wasn't ready, you know? And so coming back into a place of really honoring our bodies in that way. So let's talk a little bit about orgasm. That's a fun one. So another really great thing for our bodies, our beings, our yonis, everything is the experience of orgasm. This energy in the Taoist system is kind of the pinnacle of energy that we want to work with. So we start when we're working with the jade egg practices, which I'll talk a little bit about now. So in the Taoist system, the part that you're probably the most familiar with, because it's kind of the most popular at this time, is the practice with the jade egg. Now, what is this and why do we do it? Well, it helps so many different things. It can help our reproductive organs to be in the right place by tonifying our pelvic muscles. So something that can happen is our uterus can get knocked out of place. Literally during intercourse, we can literally get our uterus knocked out of place. Different things can happen, right? We have a baby. Things don't necessarily go into the same place. So the jade egg practices were great for kind of getting our uterus in her happy position, making sure everything was good there. It also brings blood flow into those tissues, which increases our sensitivity and then our capacity for more orgasmic experiences. It also creates more dexterity within the muscles that's not necessarily just for pleasure purposes, but the more dexterity we have, the more we can seal that vital life force. Like I was talking about in the menstrual part, we lose our jing during menstruation, but we also lose it, you know, if we don't have tonified muscles in that area, or if, you know, we can lose a little bit through orgasms, but most specifically, we lose a little bit through clitoral orgasm. So we want to like tonify those muscles so that they become a bowl that holds this precious sexual life force energy that we have for our youthfulness, for our vitality, for our radiance, for, you know, this, for our energy levels, right? So the jade egg is a predominant tool for this. It helps to balance these yin-yang energies within the body, which again are important for us even to have a healthy experience as females in relation to our sexuality and our cycles as a whole. So the jade egg is just this amazing tool for all of that. And so when we're working in these Taoist practices where we're working with energy, which is the most important part, the physical, the jade egg is not the most important part of these practices. So don't get stuck on the physical. We want to learn how to work with our energy, because here we have within these reproductive organs this amazing force of creation, essentially. Like, wow, we can create a baby, you know, we can create a whole new life in our womb with our eggs and this energy, right? So we want to be able to tap into that. You know, we want to be able to use that to nourish not only our reproductive organs, but all the other organs of the body, as well as the glands, as well as the cells, as well as the nervous system. So the different energies we work with are unaroused sexual energy, aroused sexual energy, and then orgasmic energy being kind of the peak of that. So this is another big topic for women because, you know, I know this is another thing I've experienced in my own personal journey. I went from only being able to have clitoral orgasms with myself, could never orgasm with a partner. I still had amazing sex, but I wouldn't have orgasms. And this was earlier on, again, before I connected my voice and my heart with my sex. One moment. Oh, there's a screen sharing thing happening. Oops, are you guys still there? Rosalind, do you know how you did that? Sorry. I don't know what happened, but somebody's screen sharing. And I don't know how to get out of it. Whoa, that's weird. Does anybody have any suggestions who's used Zoom before? That is so bizarre. Sorry, loves. I'm going to try to figure this out for a moment. There we go. There's me anyway. Okay, there I'm back. Okay, I don't know what just happened. I think ET just showed up. Okay. Thanks, Dolores. You're awesome. Oh my God. I think Mercury's still retrograde potentially. And my God, it's been, yeah, a journey with technology for me this last week. So there was just another moment. What was I talking about, ladies? That was bizarre. Oh, right, orgasmic energy. So yeah, I came from a place where I could, I had difficulty orgasming with men, and I was really only familiar with a clitoral orgasm. Now, this was in the beginnings of my sexual explorations, but in diving into the Taoist traditions and whatnot, I became more aware of my orgasmic potential. And so this is something that we can consciously do. So when we're working with, as far as holistic yoni care, there's some really important things that we can do to kind of stimulate deeper orgasms. So these are the orgasms we're going to have the most healing energy in the body. And then the idea in the Taoist system is that we want to keep all that energy in the body. Now, orgasms can have a tendency to be more explosive, where we lose energy, but we want to start like holding that energy in the body so that it can nourish all the organs and cells. And again, all of this is in the name of health, longevity, spiritual awakening, because we can use that energy even in our spiritual pursuits. So this is why it's really important to cultivate being able to be an orgasmic woman. So let's talk a little bit about that. So there's different types of orgasm that we can have. I'm just going to talk about 3 specifically for the sake of time. So we can have our clitoral orgasm, which is great and is a really important aspect, especially I feel like for warming our sexuality up. These orgasms do tend to be the most superficial, as in the most external, the more similar to male orgasms, where it's like we can have, they're harder to draw in and up. They tend to be more terminal. So a lot of times after we have a clitoral orgasm, our sexual drive will peak and then drop off afterwards, and we'll need like a recovery period, kind of like a man would, although usually not as significant. So that's kind of the first type of orgasm. Now, if we go in deeper, we have the G-spot, of course, and that's that spongy tissue behind the pelvic bone on the top side of the yoni. So this is where we can start having deeper orgasms and more multiple orgasms. You can have multiple clitoral orgasms, but they usually need a break in between them. Whereas with the deeper orgasms, they can just really start rolling, and one can come after another. So if orgasm has been a challenge for you, a great way to start is by internal yoni mapping or doing internal vaginal massage. This is another thing I was talking about during the menstrual cramp section. So we want to start, this is also, I'll cover this in our 4th module in the Jade Temple online immersion that's coming up as well, a little bit more detailed, which is, I call it vaginal acupressure from the Taoist system. So there are literally pressure points for all the different organs and meridians within the yoni. So, but on an orgasmic level, we just want to go in there and basically release the muscles. Notice where we have tension. Notice where we have tightness. Orgasm is a space of release, of really letting go and surrendering. Now, if we have hypertonic muscles or too tight of muscles or too much numbness, also. So those are kind of the problems. It's like pain, tightness, numbness are not in the service of orgasm, right? So we want to start working out the knots, just like we would in any other part of our body. In the yoni, we hold a lot there. It's silly to me that there aren't more practitioners who do this kind of work, but there are getting to be more and more because they're starting to realize how important this is for women. There's a wonderful book called Wild Feminine by Tammy Lynn Kent, who I can't recommend enough. She's a pelvic health specialist out of Portland, Oregon, and she does this kind of work, and she wrote a whole book about it it's like one of my Bibles. So I can't recommend it enough. But starting with massage, really tapping into those different places, massaging the G-spot. The next orgasm I want to talk about is the most mystical one. It's usually the full body orgasm. It's where we get to have that experience of our uniqueness merging into the omnipresent, right? Where we kind of on a cellular level dissolve into existence, or if we're with a partner, to become one here. They are difficult to find. I can send you some links after this talk for pelvic health practitioners. Tammy Lynn Kent's book, I believe, has some resources in the back as well. Anyway, so the cervical orgasm is where we really, like, the channel between the physical, the root, and divinity really opens. This is where the sex magic comes in, when we can really open. I mean, if you look at the chakra system or the Egyptian alchemies or the Taoist traditions, we want that energy to move through this hollow channel. Now, if we have blocks anywhere, if our womb and heart aren't communicating, if our womb and power center aren't communicating, if our womb and our throat aren't communicating, our womb and our vision aren't communicating, our womb and our higher intelligence aren't communicating, we're going to have blocks. But the cervix is the root of that all. And when we can dilate that cervix into an experience of pleasure, we get to have this like cosmic orgasm experience, right? So how do we even go about starting that? Well, again, massage. So the cervix tends to be, in most women, numb or even painful to the touch. So there's a subtle pleasure that starts to build there. And what I like to do is, with a clean finger and a cut nail, go in there with some oil and literally just massage around the cervix, massaging in circles. And so inviting sensation into the cervix, and inviting pleasure to be there. So again, this is just bringing more awareness, more blood flow, more energy there. So our yoni shouldn't just be a receptacle for sexual touch. It should also be a receptacle for therapeutic and loving touch in other ways, and that will enhance when we are having sexual experiences. And again, it will enhance our experience of being the ones who are tending this part of our miraculous bodies. So I'm going to look at our time. Okay, I do want to go into, just because I find that, Shona's online and she offers these sessions. So Shona is a great outlet for this. And Shona does a bunch of other amazing stuff with her work at wombillumination.com as well. So if you're looking for guidance on yoni steaming or on doing like castor oil treatments and all of this stuff, Shona is awesome, awesome, awesome. And I think probably a bunch of you are here because of her blasting it out. So yeah, and her link is right there. And she's also got lots of great tools that you can use for doing this internal massage, because it can also be really hard to do with your fingers and on yourself. So you can use like an obsidian wand is great, or a rose quartz wand, depending on what you're working with. I tend to only recommend obsidian if you're really like intentionally doing some dirty work, so to speak, because it's a very strong energy, very clearing. And if we're not ready to clear something, it might be a little bit intense. And first yoni steam tonight, that's awesome. And the rose quartz is much more sweet. So if we're working on reestablishing the connection between our voice and our womb, our heart and our womb, our power in our womb, the rose quartz is a really great place to go. So those crystal wands are great for doing this internal massage. So I want to move into the more taboo subject of STDs because this is relevant when it comes to yoni care and yoni health. So there's a plethora of things we can experience in this realm. Well, before I go straight into STDs, I want to talk about just other issues we can have with our yonis, such as chronic yeast infections, chronic BV, chronic, there's just different things we can have. So these infections, one thing I want to say that is not a very popular thing is that, so the pH of the yoni likes to be acidic, which seems counterintuitive to a lot of people because everyone's all about alkaline, alkaline, alkaline. Our yoni likes to be acidic. She likes that. That's her happy place. So some things we can do to support her pH are eating lots of citrus. Another thing, just drinking a lot of water, staying hydrated is really great for yoni health. But I like to do lemon water in the morning. That's a great thing for her. Eating parsley is great to maintain that balance. So if you're dealing with chronic BV, chronic yeast infections, you want to be doing citrus and parsley and different foods like that. Diet is huge here. You don't want to be eating a lot of like bread and these different things. So you want, and definitely cutting back on sugar. But one of the main causes for a lot of women's chronic BV infections especially is semen. So I'm not sure whose idea this was, God, to make semen alkaline and yonis prefer acidity. But semen, I'm not going to say it's like bad for the womb because I could think that it can also be really healing, especially with the right man. But it can also throw our pH out of whack just on a physical level. So we want to be aware of that. So if we have a partner who we allow to ejaculate inside of us frequently, and then we're having chronic infections, then that's something we want to take note of and maybe not do so much of, or find different times in the cycle that fits better or whatnot. But that's definitely one thing that can happen there. Shona also has, on the note of chronic BV and yeast, there are these great clay wands that have been game changers for me because, like I said, I used to have chronic BV, and that was when I learned of the semen thing. So I've since completely been 2 years no BV whatsoever, and that little wand has been the thing. Like if I go to a tropical place and there's just a lot of moisture, when I'm in India, a lot of times they use water to wash with, and so it's like, and there's nothing to dry, and so you're like washing yourself with water and then just like pulling up your pants and it's all wet, like horrible design for the yoni. So this wand, whenever I feel something starting, I just literally put it in for like 90 seconds, only pull it out, and it, like, for me, nips anything in the butt. So that wand is a huge ally and tool, and you can get those on Shona's website as well. Thank you, Shona, for having all the goods. And so some things we can do for those. Also for the chronic BV, boric acid is really great. So you can get that in like a pharmacy and then buy empty capsules and put it in capsules and then do one of those each night for 6 nights. That's been great for working with BV. For yeast, sometimes using garlic suppository, so actually a clove of garlic. I like to nick it. Now you want to see if you're sensitive to it. If that makes it sore, don't do that, but you can put garlic in. But again, that wand for me has been, I feel like it works great for both of those things. Now, let's move into STDs. Now, after my journey with cervical dysplasia, I do really recommend women get their pap smears. And I think they've changed the recommendation from every year to every 3 years, which I think is fine. If you've had a history of chronic, of abnormal paps, I think it's probably better to get it maybe more frequently than every 3 years. But if you don't, then I think every 3 years is okay. So HPV, if you're not aware, there's a bunch of different types, some of which cause warts, which are more probably embarrassing and annoying than much of a health risk. But then there are a few types of HPV that can cause cervical cancer that unfortunately cannot be tested for in men yet. I'm not sure why. I'm not sure why that's the case, but it's something that I feel like we need to be aware of as women. And I'm noticing, because I've been very public with my experience with it, I have a lot of women coming to me, and it's making me realize kind of the size of the epidemic of this. And it's deeper than the physical piece, obviously. I feel like the cervix, again, like I said, the cervix is really that gate guardian, and there's just a lot going on with the feminine right now. And so this is one of the things that's showing up in the field for us to really, really heal. Now, the thing I'll say about it, in case any of you are currently or will ever deal with this, is that it can be healed naturally. And there's a lot of fear in the medical system around it. The doctors are really pushy about it. So you really have to trust that you can heal it yourself, but you can. And some great ways to work with not only HPV, but also with herpes, as well as the female system as a whole, is to take multivitamins. Specifically for HPV prevention, folic acid is amazing. It's going to be great for you no matter what. It's a great prenatal thing to take, but especially for warding off HPV, folic acid is an ally. So to take, I think it was, I can't remember if it was a 400 or 800 milligrams a day, but getting a folic acid supplement, or just making sure your multivitamin, if you take one, has folic acid. So that's one great way. Keeping the immune system boosted. When it comes to viruses like HPV or herpes, it's really important that we just keep our immune systems happy. And this goes in with what I said from the very beginning, with nourishing the kidneys, nourishing the organs, nourishing that Jing energy. We want to make sure we're at our peak performance, so how do we nourish the immune system? Well, again, Schisandra berry is another great way. We have vitamin C, we reduce stress, we take immune boosters. Anti-inflammatories are also a great thing to do if you're dealing with dysplasia or herpes, So these are things that, gate guardian, woo! So yeah, we want to take preventative measures. And if we're already living with these things, it's like, they become teachers. Like I was able to, after 4 years, completely clear the HPV. My HPV test came back negative. I had my first clear pap a year ago. And I am so relieved with the journey that I was on with that. Now, herpes is another ally that I get to dance with. And when I first contracted it, was during a very emotional part of my life. And I'll just be really transparent. I contracted it like 3 or 4 weeks after I had a cervical biopsy. So I had an open wound on my cervix that was still in the process of healing, which is likely why I contracted it. My long-term partner and I had been very careful prior to that, and it was just like that time it slipped through the cracks, literally. So it's like right after one whammy, I got hit with another one. And I went through this whole process of being like, my sex life is over. Like, I'm just going to go jump off a cliff now. And my first year with it was really hard. And I had like continual outbreaks, and it was like this really stressful thing. And it really affected my relationship with my sexuality and my yoni. There was a part of me that felt like, I'd been forsaken, I felt pissed off at my yoni. Like, here I'd been on this huge healing journey, and then this happens, and I was just like, I can't win with you, but being committed to this path, I was like, but I can't, there's part of me that feels like I've gone through this journey so they can share this information. So I'm like, there's always a gift, but it's just something that I've learned to live with, and it's become an ally. Like, how do we turn these things that happen to us, whatever it is, whether we have to get an ovary removed because of a cyst, or, a full hysterectomy, or a C-section birth rather than a vaginal, like whatever happens to us in our female journey, how do we make it an ally rather than like another thing that happened to us, because I've noticed for myself, I can fall into a victim mentality of like, oh, the feminine's been through so much, like I can't take anymore. Like, I push away the experience rather than integrating it. And what I've learned is that we really need to integrate the challenging experiences so that they can become a part of our medicine. And herpes has become one of those allies for me, in that it lets me know, like, oh, I'm overly stressed out. Like, herpes just showed up to let me know I'm stressed out and I need to chill. Right? And so let me show. Yeah. Oh, and I've heard that combo, Shona's recommending combo, has cleared herpes. Shona's another one who's been through big journeys in this area. So there are a few of us who've been through these journeys and have found our life's calling as a result. We're not here because we did it the easy way. Right? So, and then for me, my other ally on my healing journey has been the jade egg, has been huge in like really calming what I found to be an immense amount of rage in my cervix. The jade was really cooling and soothing for that, and really helped me to process all of that emotion. So anyways, so lots there. Is there anything, I just want to open while we're on this particular topic of such specific things, if there's anything specific somebody wants to ask me about in relation to this kind of stuff. Just type it in or even unmute yourself. Has anyone tried that and it didn't work? I don't know. Like I said, I'm learning the Zoom thing. You're so welcome, Dolores. My pleasure. If there's nothing specific, I'm just going to keep trucking and go into the luteal phase. So luteal phase is where we then are getting ready to shed that layer again. So what's really important in this phase is that I've said it all almost. Good. I try. I'm like, how much can I pack into 2 hours? There's still more, ladies. So the luteal phase for me has also, speaking of teachers, been a huge teacher for me. And this is because, well, this is when I become the most sensitive. This is when many of us become the most attuned to what's working and not working in our life. Sometimes painfully attuned, right? So it starts like things start to rub us during this side. This is when we have PMS so much. So during this time, I think it's really important if we are able to start like withdrawing our energy. So again, during the follicular phase, it's like, yeah, put it out there, girl, like blast it. But once we're heading into that luteal phase, it's like we really, again, we're learning. I listened to this amazing talk by the spiritual teacher, Matt Kahn, last week about how, we think we're on a spiritual journey, but actually like we were the spirit first. And now we're in a body. So we're actually not more like on the body's journey, aren't we? Like, no, this is the body's journey. The spirit hasn't quite gotten that yet. And I listened to his talk and I was like, oh my God, like that's so true. Like when I really look at it, this has been my body's journey, right? And so honoring that this is the body's journey, how do we learn to not push ourselves? The mind always wants to push. The mind always wants to create, this and that, and the mind doesn't want to ever stop, right? That's one of the issues we deal with as human beings. But the body has limitations, and as long as we're in the body, we kind of have to live by the rules of the body. So the luteal phase is a great mile marker of this, because this is when the body might start to feel heavier, when the emotions, the emotions are very much of the body. The emotions will start churning and things start coming up, things start being revealed. So this is really a time of the most epic self-care. So again, like I mentioned before, this is a great time to do yoni steaming. It's a great time to spend more time in the yin essence. So that first, the follicular into the ovulatory phase are our yang part of our cycle, and then the luteal into the menstrual are the yin part of our cycle. So we want to honor the yang energy where it's due and honor the yin energy where it's due. So here in the luteal phase, we want to really practice self-care and self-honoring. We want to start drawing that spiraling energy more inward. This is a great time to really be tuning in with the womb, to be tuning in kind of more with the formless realms of things, I feel. So some great practices during this phase. Another fun Taoist secret as far as like cleansing and clearing out the yoni is working with a peeled cucumber. So you can peel a cucumber, and this is also can fit in with working with STDs and different things like that, because cucumbers are known to be antiviral, antibacterial, antifungal. Now, this doesn't mean that you make poor choice and then try to fix the poor choice with a peeled cucumber, but it does mean that, it can be an extra ally on the journey of making wise choices. So the cucumber, you peel the cucumber. I usually like to do self-pleasuring first, so I'm warmed up and ready for it. You put the cucumber inside, and you can move it around a little bit depending on your comfort level. I will say the peeled cucumber is a little watery, so it's not like the best lubrication-wise, but it's really great for the tissues. So this is a really great thing for self-care that you can do during any phase, really, but you can do it during the luteal phase to really kind of cleanse and nourish the tissues as they get ready to release. And this is a great time to do breast massage also. So coming back to the hormonal thing, in the Taoist system, we use breast massage to help nourish the endocrine system and the hormones. So this is a great thing. And in the Jade Temple online immersion, I'll be teaching specific breast massage, but you don't necessarily need to know specific breast massage. Just massage your breast intuitively, lovingly. That's the important part there. So it's going to be great during that luteal phase when you need to kind of nourish. So the breasts I think of are the energy that we're giving into the world, whereas the womb kind of receives energy. So when we've just spent a cycle giving a lot, it's good to then nourish the breast to kind of let them receive, because that's again where a lot of that giving energy comes from. So that kind of is us taking our energy back into ourselves, massaging our breast. We can massage the whole body. We can massage the womb. Again, yoni massage is great. There's some great Mayan techniques, the Mayan abdominal massage, as well as like Chinit song, which is a Thai abdominal massage. So starting massaging the abdomen. Another great tool during the luteal phase is from the Taoist tradition, and it's the 6 healing sounds and inner smile meditation. And this is another thing that will be offered in the online course. This is where we literally go into the organs and we flush out negative emotions, because we tend to get negative emotions trapped in different organs. So this is great. I call it the most amazing PMS care in the world, because we don't need to go into story to do this. We literally make specific healing sounds and we can release negative emotions from the body. So that's another great tool. So from there, I want to just open to questions again, if there's anything specific, and then I want to talk a little bit about what we're doing tomorrow. I know some of you are with me tomorrow for the Jade Egg intro, and then I want to talk a little bit about what we're going to be up to in the month-long deep dive into the Taoist traditions that incorporates a lot of this information. And some of this, of course, is extra. So let me know if you have any questions right now before we change gears. It is indeed a rabbit hole. I love that comment. So I think we're good. Okay, so how do these Taoist practices, again, relate to holistic yoni care and all of this that I'm talking about? For me, they've been synonymous, like all throughout my whole journey. I started these practices 10 years ago, hard to believe. Some of them I started at 14 years old. So my father's a Tai Chi and Qigong master and Taoist. And growing up for the longest time, I thought he was a complete whack job. I grew up in Boise, Idaho, and he was just different than everybody around. And it took me getting older and maturing to be like, wow, like he's he's on to something, you know? And so I started studying Tai Chi and Qigong with him at 14 and continued studying with him. I've been interested in health for a very long time and embodiment specifically. And as I get older, I'm more interested in feminine lineages of embodiment. Yes, the recording will go to everyone, so you will not miss it as long as you're registered, which you are, my dear. No worries. What was this one? Yeah, right. Totally. Yeah. So let me be faith for you, Anaya, that it can change. It changed for me. My father became my teacher, not just my father, but my teacher. So I started studying with him, and then at 21, I discovered kind of the whole sexual realm of teachings in this space and started practicing them. Now, when I first started practicing with the jade egg specifically, I practiced wrong. And what I mean by that is I was very excited I wanted to have the tightest, most awesome, like, yoni ever, and for men to just think I was the most amazing thing in the world. And and so I, already being small and never having given birth and being very physically active and a dancer, I made my yoni too tight, and I actually created hypertonic muscles in my pelvis, which actually is more what my particular body airs on. So, you know, this, I think, is one of the dangers of kind of the explosion of like yoni eggs and this and that, is that it happened with yoga in the West as well, where it's like, here's this 8-limb system that can lead us to divine union with all that is. And we're like, oh, that makes a hot body. And, you know, I'm not knocking it, but, you know, so we brought 1 limb out of 8 to the West and totally westernized it, which there's nothing wrong with it. And ultimately it had a hugely positive impact on the West, hugely positive. Yoga is amazing. And it's now like on every corner, and it's just been, yes, embrace your witchness, Ma. So it's been an ally, but things were lost in translation. And with the jade egg work, I feel like it's really important that we recognize what it actually is for, like the deeper implications of what this work is for, which are mostly energetic. So a lot of these practices, yoga included, tantra included, the Taoist system and the jade egg practices included, they're all about subtlety. They're not about the gross, not as in like ew gross, but like as in gross and subtle, physical and energetic. So what we have a tendency to do in the West is we focus on the physical, which is what I started with the jade egg. Like, oh, I want to do this for, you know, this reason. And thankfully for me, yoga happened like that as well. So through yoga, you know, I got into these things out of health. But as I went deeper into the systems, like this really amazing maturation, for lack of a better term, happened within me, and under a deeper understanding unlocked. And so that's what I'm hoping to share in the upcoming course that I'm doing, that I'm giving a taste of tomorrow in the Jade Egg intro webinar. So in this course, we learn, you know, the physical stuff, the multi-orgasms and the more sensation and these kind of things, they're a natural result of the practices. You don't have to try for those if you're doing the practices correctly. That's like a given. But what we want to focus on in the practices is the subtlety. And again, as I was explaining the female sexual response, I feel like we're needing to retrain from what society's told us our sexuality is like into what it really is. And the more we can tune in with the subtle energies of our sexuality, the more pleasure we're going to be able to hold. You know, then it's like just the right touch can become orgasmic, you know? And so I come at these practices very much from that angle of like, how can we source like the deepest part of ourselves? How can we become so anchored in the subtle realm of our sensual, sexual, just embodied experience, right? So these practices are anchors for us to get attuned with that. And after a decade within this system now, specifically the sexual energy system, I've had a lot of time to like fine tune. I've had time to do it the wrong way, and then, you know, figure out the right way, and then figure out my way, you know, my own unique relationship with these practices and whatnot. But I feel like it's important within these that we have a context for Taoism. And again, Taoism is this amazing container where we want to learn to reconnect with the nature that's within us, that's without us, that guides us through these cycles of womanhood, right? Taoism is an amazing map. And one of the other amazing things about these practices is that they were created in a time when we didn't have so many things pulling us away from nature. Like, we really do live in a time where, you know, here we are on a computer, we're doing things that are pulling us further away from nature, from the natural energies. And these maps were created back in a time when there were less distractions, so people were able to go deeper in and kind of like see how the energy moves within, to really be with the subtlety, right? And these maps withstood the test of time, withstood the test of the patriarchy. Taoism was banned from China for a long time, made illegal, temples burned. Especially these practices had to go underground, but they've re-emerged for a reason. And I guess my passion within it all is that it remains a part of that river of the lineage that it came from, because there's so much to drink from within that. And the wholeness of the feminine being, I feel like, can really be contained and nurtured within this system. And that's one of my great passions in this life, is finding systems that really hold us as women, you know, because we're unique. And one of the things that happened with the patriarchy has happened in the yogic system, it happened in the tantric system, it happened in the Taoist system, is that, you know, women no longer became authorities. And so the power was handed over to men. So a lot of these practices got retranslated through a male body. Now, a male body is different. It's opposite. Again, yin and yang. They're completely different. And so we've had to reorient and navigate how these practices look in a feminine body. And thank goodness there were female practitioners, you know, that literally were hidden underground, that have reemerged with their teachings now that it's like safe to do so, and so needed at this time. So this has been one of my great passions, is kind of finding these old lineages of feminine embodiment that really, not just feminine embodiment, but feminine spirituality, because ultimately, it's all good. We're almost done, Dolores. You're so welcome, and thank you for being here. So yeah, finding and tapping into these systems that can really guide us on a spiritual journey, which includes, this is another piece with a feminine lineage of a practice, it includes our sexuality. It includes, you know, being in and of this planet, being in and of this body, being in and of this earth, you know, rather than trying to get to heaven or this afterlife or this other thing. So the Taoist tradition is very much about being here, about working with what we have, which is this fountain of sexual energy, which is these physical organs. And again, in these practices, we work a lot with our ovarian energy specifically. We work a lot with the different energies of the organs. We work with the Yoni muscles. So we're going to be working in this area and beyond. So in the webinar tomorrow, I'll be giving a taste of one of my favorite practices from this whole tradition, which is the ovarian breathing and microcosmic orbit, where we'll dive into milking this precious Jing energy, sexual energy from the ovaries, and learning to circulate it throughout the body. So we'll get an embodied experience of that tomorrow, and some other tidbits from that system of practice if you're interested in that. Then, and registration will be open for that webinar until tomorrow morning. And then it's at 2 tomorrow, 2 to 4, same times, also with a replay that will be sent to your inbox so you won't miss it. And then And then September 6th, I'm opening the Jade Temple online initiation, which is an initiatory course that will take place in 4 modules where we really dive into the whole of this system. And literally, I'm going to give you enough to practice for years to come. Because when we're going into these practices, we're not going into quick fixes. You know, we want something, a practice is not something that has an end goal. It's something that's ever evolving. And so the journey is each step of the way. You know, the goal is the journey itself. So what I'll be giving in this online course is a breadth of practices from this whole tradition to give you a full-bodied picture of what this tradition holds and how it can hold you. And then that will be enough for you to practice and go on a journey with for years to come, you know. And there's of course more, and it goes even deeper and deeper. It's a spiral, and it's really quite infinite. But you'll get an amazing foundation to really go the distance for some years to come. And some of the things we'll be covering in there are the first module is cultivating good chi. So this is where we learn to cleanse the organs of the body. We'll be doing that practice I talked about where we clear out the negative emotions and work with the yin organs of the body, and do some yummy spinal warm-ups to open up the channels of the spine. And we learn a self-chi massage to help nourish the chi of the body, as well as a 5 elements qigong practice that I learned from my father, which I'm really excited about sharing that. This will be the first time I've publicly shared a practice that I've been with since I was 14 years old. So that's really fun for me. So a very foundational practice of how we can nourish our system with energy. Because we want to do that before we start working with our sexual energy. We want to already have a good foundation. So whether you're a yogi, you know, in the tantric system, it's important that you practice yoga before you're working with sexual energy, because we want the sexual energy has a lot of karma attached with it. And so we want to clear our channel before we start working this denser, more karmically charged energy. So that's what we do first. So that's our first week. Our second week, we go into harnessing that Jing energy. So we'll go deeper into milking the energy of the ovaries, learning how to channel that sexual energy throughout the body, the different types of sexual energy we work with, the different types of orgasmic energy and how we work with that. So module 2 is all about sourcing our essential energy, or the sexual energy, and learning how to channel it and hold it within the body for health and well-being, as well for greater sexual surrender and ecstatic experiences. The third module is all about the jade egg, and so I give a breadth of jade egg practices and a bonus practice I call the jade power practice that I developed myself, because I do like to work myself. So this would be a good follicular phase practice, because you're working a lot of strength and a lot of different muscles all around the pelvic floor area. So the third module is a bunch of different jade egg practices for working with the egg in lying down positions and seated positions and standing positions. And then our fourth module that we'll be covering is called Tend Your Yoni, Tend Yourself, which we tasted a bit of today, where we'll go into some Taoist secrets of yoni care. We'll go more in depth with the vaginal acupressure that I shared here. And then we're also going to go into some of the allies of the jade egg, which are working with rose quartz and obsidian eggs. Rose quartz to reestablish that, like I mentioned before, the connection of the womb and the heart. So one thing that happens if we've experienced sexual trauma of any sort is that we'll disconnect our womb and our heart. And this can cause a lot of problems. Either what tends to happen is we either shut down our sexuality or we distort it. And so we want to, again, like I was in the idea of yin and yang, we tend to go to extremes. If we have something happen on this extreme, we'll then like oscillate to this extreme. So if we have something traumatic happen, you know, we might repeat that pattern, or we might like completely shut down to sexual anything. So rose quartz is a really great ally for that. Then we work with obsidian to clear ancestral patterns. And when I speak of ancestral patterns in the womb, I'm speaking not only of our lineage, like our literal blood family line lineage patterns, which is one thing we clear with obsidian, but also our soul lineage. So not just what's happened in this body in this lifetime, but what our soul has carried from other lifetimes forward. Obsidian is a stone that is very strong to work with, and so it's like when we're truly ready to do some of these deeper works and deeper clearings from the womb, which holds a lot of this ancestral stuff, then we work with obsidian. So in that final module, we'll be doing those as kind of bonus practices. And the reason I call that module Tend Your Yoni, Tend Yourself, has a lot to do with what I shared here. I really believe in tending the root of the body, because I feel like, you know, it's like a tree. You can prune the top of the tree all you want, but if you don't water it and nourish it from the roots, the tree will die. So I really believe that we're the same. And one of the things that's happened in the world with the patriarchy and with the societal idea of sexuality, and the patriarchy in general, is that they've cut people off from their root by making sex a sin and all these different things. That was a brilliant design, because if we're not nourished in the root, we can't let that energy nourish our fruits and what we have to offer the world. So that's what this is all about, is learning to nourish the root energy of our being, learning to source ourselves from within and just be in our fullest expression of ourself, and simultaneously in honor of the cycles. So having that fullness not look like an overly masculine yang expression, but also a feminine yin, receptive, open, surrendered expression of ourselves as well. So with that, I'm going to close. Please do let me know if you have anything at all you want to ask me right now. Either open the mute with the little microphone, or just tap it here into the group chat. And thank you all so much for being here today. It's really my honor, and I just love sharing this information, and I'm grateful to have people to share it with. So I really hope you were fed by this and that it benefits you in so many ways. And let me know if there's anything that you'd like to ask before we close. Yes, my pleasure. Thank you for being here. Yay. Yay, Shona. So sweet. All right, ladies. Well, it sounds like we're good to go. So thank you so much again. And if you're feeling like you want a little taste of the Jade Temple Online tomorrow, 2 to 4, we'll have a taste. So you can register for that at my website, Shakti Temple Arts, and it's under offerings, Taoist Jade Egg. And then Jade Temple Online is also under offerings, ShaktiTempleArts.com, and then you can read even more about what we're going to be diving into in September. Yay, you're all registered, awesome. Our early registration rate closes on September 1st for the full month-long immersion, and you'll save $50 if you register by that time. And afterwards, it's a bit more, but registration's open until September 5th. And even if you can't make the exact deadlines of the, not deadlines, but the frame of the course, the material will be available far beyond that. So you'll basically get to keep everything that I offer. There'll be PDFs to download, audios to download, videos to download, or just save the links of. So you'll have everything infinitely beyond the course. So if you're interested in that, check it out. I'd love to have you. And if you're just popping in for this webinar, thank you so much. So many blessings to all of you.